Okay, just a quick tutorial. Um, I'm sending this along just to help a student with their scene, but I think the other thing embedded in this is how do you diagnose a problem in a 3D program, right? How do you, um, even if you don't know all the technical stuff, how do you begin to make some assumptions about maybe where a problem is? So in this case, a student has created these kind of like reeds, right? These cattails along here, and actually these aren't meant to be real. They're meant to be kind of like lighting, designed pieces here, right? So the idea that these are cylinders that are kind of bent and on top is a capsule that acts as a light source. So in working with the student, then was the idea of like what would be the most efficient? How do we utilize this? Do we put put a light inside of the cattail to make them look like little individual bulbs? That creates a lot of lights. We also tried to turn each one of these little capsules into a mesh light. And in all of these cases here, so in one of them, what the student had done is put a spotlight inside of here as part of the setup. But in each of those cases, it just took forever for RedShift to start going, right? To start doing something. It was taking several minutes just for it to build the radiance cache. And I'm not a software engineer or anything, so I'm not sure why this is happening, but I have some guesses. And I think the first thing is you normally use RedShift, and in fact, I did a little test where I turned off the cloner and I just put the put the light, on inside this one object, which is positioned somewhere over here, right? And I rendered it, and it kicks right off, right? It does exactly what I want it to do. And I tried it also where I turned this capsule into a mesh light, and I put it in there, kicks it right off again, right? But then when I turn on the cloner, right, and try to do this, all of a sudden it gets bogged down. Now, I don't know if it's some optimization. I'm using version 24 instead of version 25 for the consistency of the class. So maybe this is something in version 25 that it has no problem with, but in 24 it does. And obviously the problem is somewhere in the cloning, right? In something that it's doing. So if I have 250 of these, right? And I put the cloner in, or the light in the cloner, then I'm gonna have 250 lights. If I set this up to be a mesh light, and the mesh light clones itself based on the 250 capsules, right? I have 250 individual mesh lights. So something in there is probably not working well to create all those copies. At least this was my assumption, right? If it's just one, it seems fine. If it's making a whole bunch of clones, it's problematic. So I have used mesh lights before where the mesh is kind of complicated, right? It's just one mesh, but it has lots of little pieces. So what if we could combine this so that really it was just one mesh that happened to have a bunch of polygons, and that way I would be creating one mesh light, but it just would have lots of little islands of mesh lighting, right? I don't want to try the other method, because and again, I would be creating 250 lights. So I took this spotlight and I turned it into an area, and I turned it into mesh. And the one thing about this too, with the cloner, I think I can put the cloner in there. In fact, I'll give it a try. Let's see how well this works. I could also put it in a connect object, but let's just take this cloner and put it in there. So I'm going to turn all of the cloning into a mesh light, and let's see if this works. All right, so I'm still getting slow. My poor machine tried to freak out. So that would be my assumption. Is what I'm going to do is use a connect. So what's great about Cinema 4D is it kind of like it's procedural and generative as it works along. So these individual objects, I can change what they are, and then they go into the cloner, right? And the cloner duplicates and puts them around the place wherever they want. But it's kind of a summary of operations. So if I take the cloner and now I put it in Connect, all those pieces are now connected into one object. And let's go back here and let's take the connect and put it in there. And let's see what happens. And hopefully, boom, look at that immediately. And I'm doing screen capture right now, right? So it's still just cranked that out very quickly. It's using Meshlight. Obviously, this is IPR, so it's a little grainy, but if I were using emissions as a material, this would be so much worse as far as the grain. So I'm going to turn that off so I don't freak out my screen capture. So I guess the thing here is, well, hey, Smarty Pants, you were able to get the Meshlight on all of it. We only want it on the top. So let's just go ahead and duplicate this one. Oops. Sorry. It's early in the morning. I'm hotkey crazy. All right, so disconnect. Let's turn off the light, right? So I'm just going to disable the capsule, and I'll let the other stuff that's the student created sit in here. And in this one, I'll just disable the cylinder. So now if I turn this on, oops. Right, I just have that lighting happening from that. Let's stop that for a second and make this a little brighter. I don't know. Let's try that. Right, so immediately kicks off, builds its irradiance cloud, and can light this up just as we would want. So the moral of the story is the procedure here is use the connect to put these cloners into one thing. The moral of the story is test things, right? If this works for one object but not for many, something about creating the many is the problem, right? And then you just have to make some guesses about, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? The other way that I tried this as I was trying to figure it out for myself is I ended up I just turned them into just raw polygon objects by doing current state to object and delete. But the connect does everything that we really want. And the nice thing is it has flexibility to go back and change things if I want. You just have to remember that, well, this one is cloning the stems and this one is cloning the pieces at the top. So, all right, 7.5 minutes of tutorial goodness. I hope that helped.